Hi, welcome to Skylight Music Studios. My name's Lee, and today I want to talk about a variation on the German timpani grip. Now, I saw this in a drum clinic video on YouTube, 3 o'clock in the morning one day many years ago, and I really at first thought it was a weird idea, but then because it came from Tony Williams, who has to be one of the finest drummers ever, I decided to look into it a little bit further. Now, this idea is basically taking the German technique, which is back of the hand facing upwards, palm of the hand facing downwards, and where a lot of techniques and grips use bounce, the Tony Williams idea was to actually play each stroke and not have this sort of, let me just pop the stick down, not have this sort of released bounce thing happening. You see how that could happen in slow motion, okay? So what's happening there is you're gripping between first finger and thumb, okay? So the other fingers can get splayed out a little bit, which is really cardinal sin anyway. You never want to do that. But a lot of people bounce the stick and use this technique. I see a lot of guys playing press rolls and even double strokes using this kind of technique. Now this, as I show you there again, this doesn't work for me at all. And what Tony Williams was saying was, in order to negate the bounce somewhat, you're still going to get a reaction from the drum head, of course, especially on a snare drum because it's incredibly tight. And obviously on the older jazz guys, they played with the tom-toms tighter as well. So you will get a reaction and a bounce from the surface. But the idea is to not have that reaction and sort of have a lot of movement and bounce. Okay. The idea is to actually control that in a more sort of every sort of note played as opposed to bounced way. Hope you get what I mean there. What I mean is, if you're going to do this, let's see if I'm going to do a sort of a... So if you're going to do that sort of molary type thing, there is a tendency, I mean, I do try to play every stroke, but there's a tendency to release the fingers somewhat, okay? Now with this sort of, I call it the Tony Williams grip, what you do is you actually hold the back of the stick with the two fingers 3 and 4. Okay, just like this. Okay, see on the side. Now, the rest of the hand almost acts like a channel. So when you then play that grip, you've actually got a lot of control here. The thing is, you have to keep grip, not too tightly, of course, because that would cause problems. But you have to keep hold with these back two fingers, no matter what the front 3 do. Now, the idea of this is that every time you play a stroke, you actually play the stroke and you don't bounce the stroke. So if you play a double, you play 2 strokes. Now, obviously, you can't see underneath the stick from here, but what's happening is that by using this double wrist motion, I'm holding the back of the stick, I have absolute control of the stick. Now, if you use a slack drum head, like a bigger drum, like a floor tom or something like that, what will then happen is, if you're bouncing, the different tensions of the drums can give you quite a weird reflection from the stick. You know, what comes back at you isn't quite maybe what you want to feel. By playing every stroke and holding onto the stick with the fingers 3 and 4, the back of the hand, you end up with a much more controlled stroke. So when you go around the tom-toms, it feels the same as when you hit the snare drum. Even though my tom-toms are a lot more slackly tuned than the snare drum is much tighter, you don't really get a difference in the way you feel the stick coming back at you, because it's less of a bounce and it's more of a hand movement. So you end up with, in Tony Williams' words, a much more sort of powerful technique. And obviously the grip is sort of more powerful because you're playing every stroke. Now that means that if you're going to come up and play an accent, You might be coming up a bit heavier, a bit higher, but you have complete control of the stick, and your hand is always gripping the stick, as opposed to this type of thing, where I show you that here on the side, where the fingers splay out. Now, if we don't get that, we keep the back of the hand holding on here, then we have the hand turning upwards and playing this heavy stroke. Okay, so this to me is a derivative of the German grip, because when I practice this, and I do like to play like this, I have to say, I'm basically playing from a German grip. So then I'm holding the back of the stick whilst the top of the hand, the back of my hand is facing upwards and the palm is facing downwards. All in all, this gives you, as I say, this, what I can only call a Tony Williams grip. I've never seen anybody else explain this, ever. But there was a drum clinic, which has been about 5 parts on YouTube at one point. I don't know if it's still up there. And he does talk at one point about grips. And he goes on about not bouncing and playing every stroke. And this is how he explains what he's doing, by holding the back of the stick with 3 and 4. So just to put it out there, because I've never seen anybody else explain it on YouTube either, this is the Tony Williams thing, a control thing, heavy stroke technique. And it's quite a nice challenge, actually. If you go from bouncing the stick and using first finger and thumb to always sort of play your strokes, to playing from the back of the stick, it's completely alien, but it works quite nicely. I like it. It's a different way of trying to make the stick work, and a different sort of control. So that's a Tony Williams grip. I would try and find that video if you can. He doesn't talk about it too much, but he does talk about it, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And obviously, when you watch him solo, you can see what he means with the power. I hope you enjoyed that. Tony Williams grip. I'll move on to the next one, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.